Timothy is a movie lover for millions. Dalton will forever be known as the James Bond who brought danger back on 007, calm, disciplined, impossible to read. He was the Bond that seemed to glance as if he could walk away from an explosion and never look back. Far before audiences near and far knew him as Britain's most earnest secret agent, yet one more. That part of his life spent in silence. Was not filmed on a movie set, and didn't appear in any script. It was the part of a man madly in love with one of Britain's best actresses. Long before the tuxedo, long before the Timothy Dalton at Aston Martin. Almost 15 years with Vanessa Redgrave. She was a celebrated actress already, whose brave personality and skill has made her one of the most revered her generation of artists. He was still making his career, making appreciation of his dedication to classical theater and his superlative intensity of stage. Together they became one of Britain's most revered couples, acting not admired for their pursuit publicity, but because they shunned it. Then almost as quietly as their romance was started, it was finished. There had been no shocking scandal, no bitter public, no sensational interviews or accusations determining who was right or wrong. They were trained on data up to October 2023. Just walked away from a relationship that had gone on for almost a decade and a half, each going towards extraordinary careers while rarely speaking about what they had once shared. But some love stories refuse to disappear. Years later, as Vanessa Redgrave reflected on the people who shape our lives and the memories that never truly leave us, many admirers found themselves thinking once again about Timothy Dalton. Around the same time, Dalton himself offered rare glimpses into his past, speaking with the same quiet dignity that has always defined him. He never sensationalized their relationship, never sought sympathy, and never attempted to rewrite history. Yet, the few words he did share revealed something significantly more powerful than a dramatic confession. They exhibited deep regard for a woman who had stood beside him during some of the most critical years of his life. This is not the narrative of James alone Bond. It is the story of two exceptional British actors that discovered each other long before worldwide celebrity reached its tallest point. Two persons whose lives became tightly interwoven and whose relationship continues to fascinate audiences long after it had stopped. Because sometimes the best love stories are not remembered for how they ended, but for how profoundly they changed the people who lived them. Timothy Dalton was born on 21 March 1946 in Colwyn Bay, Wales. However, most of it lay in Derbyshire, England. His childhood had unfolded unlike many other future film stars dreaming of Dalton's Hollywood as a young boy. Stage was a factor in the aspirations. At the end of the year 16, he went to a performance of Shakespeare's Macbeth, an experience he as life-changing. That night, after going out of the theater, no longer did he ask himself what he wanted to do. He wanted to be an actor. Leaving school before the age of 20 was a courageous move, but Dalton never seems to be looking for a safer path. He joined the Birmingham Repertory Theatre, where long rehearsals and demanding classical productions taught him discipline long before fame ever found him. While many young actors chased popularity, Dalton immersed himself in Shakespeare, believing that the stage was where an actor truly earned his craft. Those who worked with him during those early years often noticed the same qualities that would define him throughout his life. He was serious without being arrogant, reserved without seeming distant, and intensely focused. Moment he walked in front of an audience, he rarely sought attention, distance from the stage, and unlike many rising performers of the era, he appeared almost uncomfortable with celebrity. Acting was never about being famous. It was about becoming believable. Vanessa Redgrave had grown up in a world substantially different from Timothy's. Born into Britain's legendary Redgrave family, performing was integrated into every part of her upbringing. By the time Timothy was still proving himself in regional, Vanessa already had theaters establish herself as one of the country's most talented performers. Critics heaped praise on her for her extraordinary emotional range. Her audiences were mesmerized. Existence. And directors knew her had the unusual ability to control both on stage and on screen with equal ease. She was also famous for one thing set her different from many of her contemporary. Vanessa never divorced her art from her convictions. Whether we are talking about politics, humanitarian causes, or she refused the obligations of an artist should conceal her ideas just because they could be problematic. She squeezed public attention when she believed it fulfilled a purpose. In many ways, she was Timothy Dalton's opposite. He valued privacy. She accepted public debate. He measured every syllable. She talked with brave conviction. Yet underneath those disparities lie anything far more significant. Both of believed acting demanded honesty. Both glamour over dedication. Neither viewed fame as the ultimate reward. Magazine covers prior to blockbuster flicks transformed Timothy Dalton into an international star. The two actors learned they shared a deep regard for the profession they loved. It was that shared interest more than notoriety or popular acclaim that first put them together. Neither them knew it at the time, but they were about to start a relationship that would define almost 15 years of their lives. Many years that one fans would later remember as one of the loveliest British love stories. Movie. By the early 1970s, British theatre world was tiny. Same. Actors crossed paths in rehearsals, opening nights and productions all over London. It was within that close-knit community that Timothy Dalton and Vanessa Redgrave came to know one another. They were drawn together, not by the glamour of celebrity, but by a shared devotion to acting that demanded patience, discipline, and complete emotional commitment. Vanessa was already an established star when their relationship began. She had earned acclaim on both stage and screen, and her name carried enormous respect throughout Britain's artistic community. Timothy, nearly a decade younger, was still building his reputation. But those who worked with him believed they were witnessing the rise of an exceptional actor. Rather than being overshadowed by Vanessa's success, he seemed inspired by it. Friends later observed that he admired not only her extraordinary talent, but also the seriousness with which she approached every performance. their romance developed naturally away from flashing cameras and tabloid headlines. They were rarely seen trying to turn their relationship into public spectacle. Instead, they spent their time, much as many actors did, discussing scripts, attending rehearsals, traveling for productions, and supporting each other's work. It was a partnership built on mutual respect long before it became a story for entertainment magazines. What made their relationship especially intriguing was how different they appeared in public. Vanessa possessed an unmistakable confidence. Whether accepting awards or speaking about politics, she never seemed afraid of criticism. Timothy was almost the complete opposite. He carefully protected his private life, avoided unnecessary publicity, and often appeared uncomfortable discussing anything beyond his work. If Vanessa embraced public attention when she believed it mattered, Timothy quietly stepped away from it whenever he could. Yet those differences rarely seemed to divide them during the years they were together. In fact, many believed they balanced each other. Vanessa's boldness complemented Timothy's quiet confidence. He offered calm where she brought passion. She challenged ideas openly while he preferred thoughtful reflection before speaking. Together, they created a relationship that felt unusually mature for two people working in an industry often known for short-lived romances. As the years passed, both careers continued to flourish. Timothy appeared in ambitious productions such as Mary, Queen of Scots, Wuthering Heights, Cromwell, and Flash Gordon, steadily earning recognition as one of Britain's finest dramatic actors. Vanessa continued collecting acclaimed performances that reinforced her reputation as one of the greatest actresses of her generation. Their professional lives frequently demanded long periods apart, international travel, and constant new commitments. Yet, they remained together through much of the decade. To many friends, they seemed less like a glamorous celebrity couple and more like two artists growing alongside one another. They understood the pressures of auditions, difficult directors, demanding rehearsals, and the uncertainty that every actor eventually faces. Each knew exactly what the other sacrificed for the profession they loved. For nearly 15 years, it appeared they had found something remarkably rare in the entertainment world. A relationship built not on publicity or convenience, but on genuine admiration. Few could have predicted that the very careers they encouraged in one another would eventually begin pulling them toward different futures. By the mid-1980s, both Timothy Dalton and Vanessa Redgrave had reached a point in their careers where success no longer needed to be chased. It had arrived. Yet, success has a way of changing even the strongest relationships, not because love disappears, but because life begins demanding different things from the people living it. For Timothy, one opportunity stood above all the others. After years of speculation, he was approached to become the next James Bond. It was not an ordinary acting job. It was one of the most recognizable roles in movie, a part capable of transforming a career suddenly. Dalton had actually been considered years earlier, but believed he was too young to replace Sean Connery. Now, the timing finally felt right. Accepting the part meant embracing a level of international fame unlike anything he had experienced before. Vanessa realized exactly what that opportunity of having spent years navigating global. She knew recognition herself. Being James Bond would alter you. Timothy's professional life for eternity. That part was sure to make him a colossal success, but it also meant unending traveling, countless publicity, and months spent filming around the world. The quiet actor who preferred the stage would always suddenly belong to millions of people. At the same time, Vanessa stayed completely committed to her own work. She kept turning up in ambitious films, producing theater productions, devoting growing energy for political and humanitarian causes that had been vital to her existence. She had never thought an artist should keep silent just because talking created fame. Uncomfortable. Her convictions required time, attention, and sacrifice. Gradually, their lives started to move at varied speeds. There was no great treachery, no public scandal, no headline. Everything had disintegrated overnight. Instead, the distance expanded in silent way it usually goes between two people whose occupations were beginning to draw them apart. Future diverse. Weeks became separated. Months. Individual projects turned distinct lives. The chats that had at one time been shared was rehearsing and performing, superseded by schedules which seldom line up. Friends who knew them never told the end of their relationship as explosive. If anything, they remembered it as profoundly sad for that very reason. There was still great respect between them. They had spent nearly 15 years creating helping each other live together by means of victories and defeats. Like leaving that behind couldn't have been a picnic. When their relationship finally came to an end in 1986, very few public statements. Neither Vanessa nor Timothy turned up interested in finding a scapegoat. In a time of celebrity splits, each more became a tabloid. They opted for quiet amusement. It was a decision fully in accord with that of the kind of folks they always were. For Timothy Dalton, the split up corresponded with the commencement of the largest chapter in his professional life. Within a year, he would do his debut as James Bond in the living daylights, and he introduced himself to people around the globe as a darker, more realistic Ian understanding Fleming's renowned spy. To the public, it appeared that the of anything, but it also privately marked the closure of one of the longest and relationships he has ever meaningful known. Sometimes, life's biggest successes come at exactly the same. We are softly bidding farewell to the something we believed would last forever. Forever. For many, the end of a connection is end of tale. For Timothy Dalton and Vanessa Redgrave, it was just the beginning of another chapter, not a love story, but a chapter marked by. They went on with silent reverence. Wait for each other. Timothy dived into work. In 1995. 1987, audiences finally perceived him as James Bond in the living daylights. His reading astonished a lot of people. Rather than depicting Bond as a lovely Dalton went back to the playboy Ian Fleming's original vision, a man who was clever, hazardous, and often emotionally shut off. Later critics would call his performance years ahead of its era. The many Bond fans of today consider him among the nearest representations of the Fleming character ever brought to the screen. Success came in an international scale. Covers of magazines, global premieres, television interview, millions of new fans. But even in the heart of the Bond craze, Timothy was as remarkably unaltered. He still shunned publicity that was not needed, hardly spoke of his private life, and didn't want to be the kind of star who let fame dictate who he was. Those who knew him well used to say that the cameras seemed to make him happiest when ceased tumbling. Vanessa Redgrave had a very different way. Her career would include blossom with outstanding performances, theater and film, television, while her humanitarian work was an ever-increasing element of her existence. Whether talking about human rights, peace or social justice, she continued, just like she had always been. Fearless, passionate, resistance to draw a line between her public platform and her personal convictions. Their lives had taken different paths, yet neither seemed to go in distinct directions. Interested in wiping away the years they had conveyed. Unlike many celebrity couples that broke up, there were no books brimming with accusations, no interviews revisiting old disputes, and no tries to make money after it had from the relationship done. That quiet told something about both of them. 15 years together may not simply be written off as a failure. Romance, it was a shaping time in their lives both, and perhaps they knew some memories are better pristine. Timothy would have other sources later. Important links, including his lengthy partnership with actress/singer Oksana Grigorieva, the mother of his child, his only son Alexander. Turning into a father changed him in ways fame never could. His friends saw that he talked about fatherhood with a warmth seldom appeared in interviews about his career. Shielding his son from the pressures of celebrity was one of his greatest priorities, such as protecting the same as his private life. But every time the press looked back about the private history of Timothy Dalton, one name inevitably returned: Vanessa Redgrave. Not because their relationship had ended dramatically, but because it had lasted so long, shaped such important years of their lives, and remained remarkably free from bitterness. In an industry where former couples often become enemies in public, Timothy and Vanessa chose something far less common. They allowed the past to remain a place of gratitude rather than resentment. Perhaps that is why their story continues to resonate decades later. It reminds us that not every great love ends with betrayal or heartbreak. Sometimes two people simply grow into different versions of themselves. The affection does not disappear overnight. It slowly develops into respect, into memories, and into peaceful appreciation for the years that helped shape the persons they eventually became. Time has a way of softening memories, yet it also has a way of exposing which relationships mattered most. As the years passed, Timothy Dalton rarely looked back in public interviews about his career, mainly usually centered on James Bond, Shakespeare, or the shifting landscape of British cinema. If journalists questioned him about his private life, he would answer kindly before returning to the discourse. His work, it was a habit he had never Left behind. That silence often caused people to think. He was not inclined to talk. Feelings. But those who know him saw something else. Timothy was not escaping his history. He just thought that some areas of life belonged to those who had lived them, not to the headlines in newspapers. Vanessa Redgrave went a different approach. Her career is long. She was surprisingly candid about life, love, and loss. She spoke frequently of the value of human connection and about how relationships continue to shape us long after they are gone. Her reflections were never aimed at one single person, but listeners couldn't help think about the people who'd had those important years she spent of her life. Among them was Timothy Dalton. By then, nearly 4 decades had passed since their relationship began. An entire generation knew Dalton only as James Bond. Another remembered him as the Prince from Flash Gordon. Younger audiences discovered him through films like Hot Fuzz and later television appearances. But for those who had followed British theatre and cinema since the 1970s, another image remained just as vivid. Timothy Dalton and Vanessa Redgrave standing together at premieres, theatre events, and public appearances. 2 actors who seemed to admire each other as much off stage as they did on it. Looking back, what stands out isn't the ending. It's the remarkable absence of bitterness. Neither ever tried to diminish the other's achievements. Neither attempted to rewrite their shared history. In an era when celebrity relationships are often remembered for dramatic breakups, public feuds, and endless interviews, their story followed a very different path. It quietly faded into memory without losing its dignity. Perhaps that was always inevitable. Both had entered the relationship because they respected one another as artists before anything else. When the romance ended, that respect appeared to remain. For Timothy, the years that followed brought countless professional milestones. His portrayal of James Bond earned growing appreciation with time. Many fans now viewing his darker interpretation as one of the closest to Ian Fleming's original novels. He continued working steadily on stage and screen, never chasing fame for its own sake, always choosing projects that interested him rather than those that promised the biggest headlines. Vanessa's career proved equally extraordinary. Awards, acclaimed performances, and international recognition followed, but so did her lifelong commitment to speaking out on issues she believed mattered. She remained exactly what Timothy had first encountered decades earlier, a woman of immense talent, conviction, and courage. Looking at their lives today, it's tempting to ask whether either of them regretted the path they chose. There is no evidence that they did. What remains instead is something quieter and perhaps more meaningful. 2 people shared 15 important years of their lives. They helped shape each other's journeys. Then they accepted that life was leading them in different directions. Not every lasting love story ends with 2 people growing old together. Some leave behind something just as valuable: mutual admiration, gratitude, and the knowledge that for a significant chapter of life they helped one another become the people the world would eventually remember. Time has a way of changing every love story. Some end with wedding anniversaries that stretch across half a century. Others end with quiet goodbyes. Two people accepting that the lives they once imagined together are no longer possible. Timothy Dalton and Vanessa Redgrave belonged to that second kind of story. They shared nearly 15 years that shaped them long before either became the legends they are remembered as today. They never turned their relationship into a public spectacle. And when it ended, they refused to turn it into one. There were no accusations, no attempts to erase the past. Only two remarkable actors continuing their separate journeys with the dignity that had always defined them. Timothy Dalton would go on to become James Bond, introducing himself to millions around the world. Vanessa Redgrave would continue building one of the greatest careers in British acting history, while remaining true to the convictions that had always guided her life. Their paths no longer ran together, but the years they had shared never disappeared from either of their stories. Perhaps that is why people still remember them together. Not because theirs was the longest romance. Not because it had the happiest ending. But because it was real. It began before worldwide fame survived. Through years of changing careers, and ended without destroying the respect they had built for one another. In an industry where so many relationships become news for the wrong reasons, theirs became something far quieter. A reminiscence. And sometimes a memory is what lasts the longest. If this story brings up memories of Timothy Dalton or Vanessa Redgrave, we'd love to hear from you. Do you think some people retain part of our life even after the relationship itself has ended? Leave your thoughts in the comments below and we'll see you in the next story.